Are we off, Kim? Or are we still waiting?
Just finishing buffering.
Fine.
Yeah,
That's
right.
fine.
We're live, Chairman.
Can start, can we?
We can, yes.
Right. Well, welcome everyone. Good evening to this meeting of the Environment Overview and Scrutiny Committee. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Councillor Carol Coburn and I chair this meeting. I'd also like to welcome our new scrutiny officer, who is, I think, with us tonight, Mark Mills. Would you like to give us all a cheery wave, Mark? We'll get to know you over the weeks, but obviously at the moment we haven't had a chance to work properly with you. But welcome. I don't think we've got any actual new members to the committee, have we? I think we are the same committee. So let's move on then straight away to the minutes of the last meeting. I haven't seen a set of minutes for so long, but I presume at some point I will sit down and sign them all. So are you quite content with the minutes of the last meeting? Does anyone have any issues they wish to raise? In that case, could we approve those minutes? Do you just unmute and agree them?
Agreed.
Lovely, thank you very much indeed. And as I say, at some point I will sign them. Apologies for absence and substitutions, Kim, please.
I haven't received any apologies, Chair.
Right. We'll hope that everyone does arrive. So there's no substitutes tonight. Declarations of interest, do we have any of those declared before the meeting?
None declared before the meeting, Chairman.
Does anybody wish to disclose an interest? In which case we'll move straight on to questions by members of the public. Have we received any?
None received, Chairman.
Questions from member under Procedure Rule 11. Do we have any questions from members?
No, Chairman.
Right, in that case, we'll move straight on to the agenda. The good news is it's a very brief agenda, and that's good and bad, I suppose, but the good news is it does give us some time to look at the matters for as long as we need to without thinking, gosh, we've got another 9 items. So, you know, we can take our time. So the first item on the agenda is the forward work programme, and apologies for the omission. Louise, do you want to speak to this, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes. So yes, the forward programme sets out our work for the sort of coming year and even beyond that, actually. But you'll notice that it's a bit thin on the ground at the moment. So I think this evening could hopefully populate that a bit in the next hour's discussion when you hear from heads of service Richard Homewood and Zach Elwood. So service plans will be coming at the next cycle in March. There'll be revised service plans reflecting the budget. The affordable SPPD, if it hasn't already, it's in the process of being circulated to members for a sort of final view of that. Car parking review, I think Richard may say a bit more about that later in the evening. And again, with the local enforcement plan, which we've had there. So I know Zach will want to say something about that, and that will be coming forward hopefully in March. The green verges, Chairman, it's still a bit of a mystery, that one. So I'm to get to the bottom of that one. And then the place shaping is even more of a mystery, I think, to most of us as well. So it remains to be seen when that comes forward. Apologies, what should be on there is the biodiversity action plan. That slipped off, it's my error, I'm sorry about that. But in consultation with Kelvin Mills, he tells me that the biodiversity action plan is likely to be coming forward towards the end of this year, the end of 21, and it may even go into 2022. I think it's just a capacity issue at the moment for the countryside section. So at the moment, that's all we've got on our forward plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. As you say, a bit sparse. I know Martin, the Vice Chairman, has got some ideas that he would like to put forward. Just on the Biodiversity Action Plan, I mean, one of the reasons that I'm so keen to keep an eye on it is I don't want any duplication because, as we know, Farnham's doing a Biodiversity Action Plan. There are others around. and just to make sure that we don't duplicate resources. That's all. So I think we can leave that at the moment. It's obviously going to be delayed, and if it's 22, then obviously we don't need to worry about it. Martin, do you want to just say what you had in mind that you raised at the chairman's meeting?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I mentioned a couple of things. The first one was lessons we can learn from COVID. And I don't mean from the actual disease, but from the changes it's caused and the things it's made us reassess, and how these can be built on in the future for sort of a variety of reasons. One obviously is to make sure that in future we're better prepared, but also the things that it's made apparent, where there are gaps or whether there are issues that we haven't perhaps paid as much attention to in the past as we should. I've got quite a list of things, but I thought I'd throw it open to other people because I think everyone will have ideas about this. So that was my first thing. And I think it's something useful for the council to be considering as well, the long-term implications of any changes we might need to make to how we do things. The second issue was about, was linked to biodiversity, and was about trying to establish green corridors for both people and wildlife. So essentially traffic-free links between open spaces and nature sites of particular interest or value across Waverley, so that in theory you could travel without actually having to go on a road from place to place, which would be lovely, I think, and which is something that the COVID has taught us, is how valuable open spaces are and how much we depended on them, or are probably still depending on them during the lockdown. So those are my two thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you for that. If you remember right at the beginning of taking over this committee, what we decided, we really wanted not just to look at certain items that are related to the portfolio, but more to see how everything that the council does affects the environment, relates to the environment, and to be sometimes a bit like Martin is suggesting now, a little bit independent, and have a look at these things and see how we feed this into either other ONSs or into directly into the executive. Because Martin's talking obviously from this committee's point of view about what we've learned about the environment. And I think, I think that is something. I'm not quite sure what we're going to call it. Perhaps Mark can help us out at some point with sort of framing this. But I think if we don't look at these things now, we will forget. We will forget what we've learned, because once you get back into another routine, you forget. And I think, we have learned such a lot about living conditions and, the open spaces, all of these things, which I think, it is something we perhaps ought to capture. So does that sound as if we can turn it into a forward action, Louise or Mark?
Do we want to have a bit more discussion and sort of see what sort of angles people would like to take on it? And then, happy to bring that.
I think, yes, it would have to be, in a sort of light time, as it were, when we haven't got lots and lots of strategies and policy to scrutinise. But, in this sort of time, I mean, it's something I think we could start thinking about individually and then perhaps pool together to see, what sort of items. Is everybody with us on this? I mean, I've had the advantage that Martin raised it earlier, but do people think it would be useful? I'm really thinking we can do it individually in our own spaces and then combine what we have rather than spend a lot of officer time on this, Well, I'll throw that thought. Well, Martin's thrown that thought out. The green corridors, again, I mean, it links into so much of what we do. And again, it comes up in our neighbourhood plan. I'm sure it comes up in other neighbourhood plans. It is something that I think is a great aim within all the settlements. And as Martin says, if we can take it beyond that, again, quite how it's phrased and where it actually fits in, we'll have to take advice from the officers on this. So can
Councillor
I leave?
Gale has her hand up, Chair.
Oh, I can't see that. Good, I'm glad you told me. Right, sorry, Councillor Gale.
Yes, sorry, Chairman. Just on the points that Martin was raising, so that I can get my head around what we're looking at. It came up at a planning issue the other day that there's no minimum amenity space for new builds, and I was quite surprised that we don't actually have a minimum amenity space, and that really comes into the fact of what people have been saying recently. You're confined to barracks, and some people only have a balcony, which I know people are going for balconies now, but garden space is probably very important, especially if people wanted to grow vegetables and things. I don't know how that sort of comes up.
I think this is what I was trying to say, and you said it so much better, that it is how, when we've just thought about the ways that, or what we've learned, how we feed it in, either whether it's through planning, you know, through the housing ONS, through the environment officer, you know what I mean? I think it's something further down that we'll have to think about how we can feed it in. But you're absolutely right. This has been a beef of mine for a long time, small means space.
Councillor
Right,
Edmonds.
we've now got two types of indicating, so I apologise if I take you out of order. I'll take you in a minute, Councillor Edmonds. Louise, did you want to come back?
Sorry, no, just Councillor Edmonds had his hand up.
Oh, right.
Sorry.
Right, Councillor Edmonds.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. I think the process we're talking about is internalising knowledge, where essentially when we gain knowledge, we put it into our processes. That way we capture it. Or that's been my experience throughout my career. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else wish to add anything to our forward work programme thoughts? I know Councillor Else raised something about the sort of general street maintenance. And it was another thing I thought we could do sort of separately, but together, because a lot of us do get complaints about weeds and the other items, and just trying to work out what is the best way, because we want to be green in one sense, but we want to be tidy in other places. And again, that's something I was thinking more that we could do individually and then get together and see if there's something we should be doing about it. Again, what we're talking about really is how we manage all our environment, isn't it? Both the built environment and the natural environment. So I think in a funny way, street cleaning, although it doesn't seem to link in, does. It's get back to our verges, Louise. You know, when do you cut the verge? These things are not as easy. Not everybody agrees. And, you know, as a borough, perhaps when we've done a biodiversity action plan, we may have an idea for that. But it's all part of the same thing, isn't it? It's all about maintaining our environment, you know, in different ways, depending on which bit. Anything else that anyone would like to raise? Mark, do you have anything that you would like to say? Sorry to put you on the spot. If you haven't, say no.
Nothing in particular at this stage. However, I might email you, as you'd ask councillors to maybe kind of have their own ideas. I might, yeah, if it's okay with you, I might email each councillor on the committee and start trying to draw those ideas together into a theme.
Right, I've just tasked you with that. That's brilliant. If you do that, because I send out every so often emails saying, you know, any ideas for the, but if you send it out to everybody, get some ideas and perhaps turn them into something that we can do that's productive and doesn't waste too much of officer time, when I know at the moment officer time is precious. So that would be superb if you could do that, Mark. And it's one way of getting to know us all, isn't it? And us to get to know you. So that would be good. So anybody with any other idea, please reply to Mark's email or send him one unasked. And we'll see if we can get together a little meatier programme than we have at the moment. Does anybody else want to say anything else on the forward programme? Can we leave it in the hands of Mark then?
No
to turn
indications, Chair.
this fine. So we've done everything we're supposed to do on there, aren't they? And we'll hand over to Mark, as I say, to see if he can turn our forward programme into something more useful. That will be superb. Now, because we've got time tonight, I asked if the heads of the environment and the planning would speak first, nothing to do with the performance. We're coming on to the performance, so this is not a time where I want them to drill down into performance, but I want them to talk to us in a little broader fashion, because, you know, as backbenchers, we don't always get all the information, and I've given them free rein. I did perhaps mention to Zach that I know nothing about what's going on about Dunsfold Park, which, given how long I've been on the council and how long Dunsfold Park's been a part of it, so whether or not he's going to answer my plea, we'll find out. And because I've got you down in the order, I'm going to go for Richard first. I hope that's okay, because that's the way it's put on the agenda. And Richard, you have free range. As I say, we're not trying to analyse what we're going to look at next. We just want to hear experiences, anything you want to tell us about the department that you think would help us.
Thank you, Chair. I've been reflecting back on the last year, which has been quite challenging for all of us. There's no mistake about that. But reflecting on how it's impacting on the services within the Environment and Regulatory Services teams. So if it's okay, Chair, I just wanted to run through the various services we provide and how they've had to adapt and change to the COVID-19 pandemic, and where we see ourselves coming out of it, and returning to some sort of normality. So certainly the environmental services, that's refuse and recycling, collection, street cleaning, have been quite challenging during the last 12 months, not just because of COVID, but because of a new contract as well. We had a previous contract that ran like clockwork for 14 years. And I think all members on the scrutiny team that looked at procuring a new contract were very complimentary about the previous service and didn't want to anything to change particularly with it. But our then contractor didn't bid for the contract, and we had to tender, and Biffa were successful in being awarded the contract. The old contract, under the old contract, after 14 years, the crews got to know the residents, and they were familiar with the routes and with the customers. And there was a lot of what I call informal arrangements between residents and the crews, where they got to know each other, and they were really helpful in accommodating the needs of the residents. When Biffa took on the contract, they bid on the basis that they would look to improve the efficiency of the contract, and part of that was to change the rounds around. And I think probably the majority of residents in Waverley experienced some change in their methods of collection of refuse and recycling. Biffa changed from 13 collection rounds to 9, and they introduced a separate food waste collection round as well. So some significant changes there that residents had to cope with and manage. 44,000 of the 52,000 households in Waverley were affected by that. So that was a huge impact on residents, on top of any struggle, anything they were doing to cope with COVID. Of course, those new crews were unfamiliar with the rounds. They were unaware of any of these custom and practice arrangements with residents. And that has caused some difficulties and some issues for residents and for the collection crews as well. So we're working through those issues and trying to deal with those, but of course, dealing with them from a distance because of COVID, and dealing with them remotely, which is making it even more challenging. The impact of COVID is interesting. Certainly in terms of tonnages, I'll just look at the figures and remind myself, recycling tonnages have gone up across Surrey by 62% during lockdown and during the COVID pandemic. That's a huge increase in recycling. And indeed, there's been a huge increase in food waste as well. That's gone up 50% during this period, and residual waste has gone up 33%. So a huge amount more waste being produced at home, and that's understandable because people are not at work, they're not visiting pubs and restaurants. So commercial waste has dropped dramatically, but the domestic refuse crews that work for us are having to pick that up now as domestic waste, and that's put a huge burden on those crews, extended their working hours and meaning more trips to and fro the transfer station. So certainly that's been a challenge for them. Sickness absence amongst the crews, they're not immune to COVID, and there have been sickness absences. The company have addressed those challenges with agency staff where they can, and even the office staff and the fitter from the workshop have all been out driving vehicles and emptying bins to keep the service going. And they've managed to do that up until recently, when sickness levels have increased so much that we made the difficult decision just after Christmas that we would have to suspend some part of the service. And this part of the service that least impacted on the majority of the community was the garden waste service. So we had to suspend the garden waste service and use those crews to make up for the absences on the recycling and refuse rounds. So that will be done. That service will be started again once the sickness absence levels reduce sufficiently. All of the people who subscribe to that service will have their subscriptions extended as part of that. And we're monitoring sickness absence with BIFA daily to see how things are going. They have tried recruiting agency staff. The week before last, they trained 10 agency staff on the Saturday, and on the Monday, only 3 of them turned up for work. So they're doing their best, but it's not the sort of job that people like doing. On the parking side, there's been a dramatic drop in car park use, inevitably, due to lockdowns, and that's impacting on the council's finances significantly, with a shortfall of a couple of £1 million from the council's coffers because of a loss of parking income. We did suspend enforcement and parking charges during the first lockdown and didn't introduce charges again until July. So that again had an impact on us. In spite of all that, we carried on running the car parks. We put in notices and markings on the ground for people to keep safe distances when using the machines. We did look at sanitising the machines, but realised that it was too complicated and put warning notices up that people should use their hand sanitizer and look after it themselves. In spite of all that, we carried on with the work. The South Street car park in Farnham has been refurbished, and we've now handed it over to Crest to do the work on a new staircase and lifts. So it looks, and it's a much better car park now than it was previously. And I'm sure that that's been noticed by people. Next to it, a new multi-storey car park is underway, and the shell of that is now up. And we anticipate that that may well open by July this coming year. And we will be managing that as well. The parking teams are also working with the vaccination teams and the testing unit teams to facilitate them within our car parks and helping to manage the people coming and going from their vaccination appointments. So a very, very busy teams all around. And we haven't, in all honesty, made much progress with implementing the recommendations of the parking strategy review because of everything else that's been going on. So that's on the list for post-COVID, if you like, to deal with that. Our emergency planning team has inevitably been focused on COVID response. But on top of that, they've had to, in the background was Brexit. There was a lot of planning going on about Brexit and a no deal, an Operation Brock and Operation Stack to stack all the lorries on the motorways if we had no deal and that happened. But also the team has had to cope with flood risk management, fires such as the fire on the Heathland that happened in the latter part of last year, and severe weather plans as well. And we've got some flood warnings out at the moment. So there wasn't just one emergency to plan for, but a whole series of emergencies added to with COVID as well. We had some real issues during COVID and the lockdowns with people wanting to engage communities and hold events. And it was a very difficult juggling act with what we could allow and what we couldn't allow to happen. And some of the lessons we've learned now with the rapid rate of infection is that we perhaps should have been a bit stricter at the start in allowing people to gather in groups and hold events and that sort of thing. So some real lessons learned there. All sorts of issues came up. We had debates about driving carol services, about Remembrance Day, and about weddings and funerals. And we had to deal very diplomatically and sensitively with people to persuade them to do the right thing around these things and prevent or try to prevent the spread of infection. The environmental health team routine inspections of food businesses were delayed, but their focus was on helping businesses cope with COVID and with the outbreak and the restrictions. And lots of people diversified during lockdown and set up takeaways and other sorts of food businesses that were permitted. And some of those people had never worked in a food business before. So there were some real challenges there to work through. And the licensing team worked alongside them to manage the impact on licensed premises and restaurants, to try to help the businesses cope with lockdown, but at the same time make sure they complied with the restrictions and didn't breach the rules and put people at risk of infection. So again, a juggling act there for staff to work through that. On the sustainability side, we have continued to work through things, and the climate change and sustainability strategy and the carbon neutrality action plan came to this committee at its last meeting and has been on to the executive for approval and adoption. It will come back to you at some point with a progress report, and certainly we're now working with officers across the council to develop projects that will deliver some of the carbon reduction measures required within the action plan. Excuse me. We've got a number of projects underway already. We have a sustainability projects officer, and we are about to appoint a transport projects officer to help progress some of those projects on carbon neutrality. And we're working with the county council and the town and parish councils on an active transport initiatives across the borough. We have a cycle shelter project and the Greenway cycle route projects underway, again to promote a reduction in our carbon emissions, both as a council and as a community. We have EV charging point projects in our car parks, and we're working with the county council for on-street electric vehicle charging points, and some of those will start to appear in the next 12 months, we hope. And we're looking with Guildford Borough Council at e-cargo bikes. So I think in all, that's been quite an adventurous and busy year for environmental and regulatory services. And I'm happy to answer any questions, Chair.
I was just going to throw it open to questions, but yeah, don't worry, I'll take you in a moment. I was just going to say, I think it's very good if anybody's listening in, that they actually hear what's been going on and the amount of work, and the sort of cross-working and moving across. I've got Councillor Else first.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sorry, but I can't find my hands up facilitator. So sorry about that. Well, Richard, it really sounds, I must admire the way that your department has dealt with everything. I don't have very many complaints at all. And so I think you've done really, really well, because my ward complains an awful lot about things that don't work quite the way they think it ought to. So well done for that. And well done to BIFA. But I would just like to ask you a question which is a little bit unrelated to our level of service, and that is, what representatives have we been able to give to the importance of frontline service personnel in need of the vaccine? Because at the end of the day, if we lose our ability to collect our refuse, we are all in an awful lot of trouble on many fronts. And I personally, I mean, you can apply that to all sorts of frontline services, but we're talking about yours at the moment. So I just wondered whether you'd had an opportunity, or whether you're aware of any representation given to the importance of your frontline workers in having to be in receipt of the vaccine. The protection for staff is so very important. And just one other, if I might mention, Chairman, emergency planning. My ward fell foul of quite a few gaps in the emergency planning, or the emergency plan, shall I say, after the fire on Hankley Common, on Thursday Common. And I haven't really had the opportunity, or been offered the opportunity, to examine anything in its place, anything new. And I know we've had COVID to deal with, but I wondered how far away we were from actually finalising an overall emergency plan, regardless of COVID, for the borough, in working in conjunction with with our partners. Thank you, Chairman.
Good questions there for you, Richard.
Thank you. In terms of prioritising vaccinations, it's obviously extremely difficult and extremely sensitive. As Waverley, we haven't made any representations, excuse me, in terms of prioritising the refuse crews for vaccinations. Obviously, the government determines the prioritisation for vaccinations, and they've clearly identified care workers, people in care homes, and then people over 80, then people over 70 today, I think they've announced. Excuse me. So it's a real delicate balancing act to decide who deserves the vaccine next, and it's not within my remit to determine that. We can certainly lobby through the MHCLG, the government departments. But I think even if we did lobby, I'm afraid to say refuse collectors, like local government workers, wouldn't feature very highly up the list. Certainly people like paramedics, NHS staff, and people like that who are exposed or likely to be exposed more to infection will get priority, and there's no doubt about that. Obviously, if any of those refuse workers are particularly vulnerable, they probably shouldn't be working anyway, but you know, I can't give you an answer to that, because I don't think they would get the priority over other groups of people from the government, I'm afraid.
Perhaps we should all lobby. Sorry, do you want to come back outside so you want your second answer? Yeah, you're muted. You're muted.
Sorry, Chairman. I was just going to say, I was looking at it from a perspective, please forgive me, not necessarily from the view of protecting the individuals, but with the view of protecting the service. Because if the refuse can't be collected, and I wish no ill to any refuse collector, believe me, you know, I think we all need vaccination, but my question was really more about protecting the service, which is as vital in my view as any other service. Because if we get piles of rubbish and piles of food stashed up all over the place, we're all in trouble from another threat. So I just wonder whether it might be worth considering lobbying. Absolutely. I mean, you may not get anywhere, but I do feel we need to be lobbying as a local authority. Yeah. Thank you, Chairman.
No, I agree with you. Richard, did you have an answer about the emergency?
Well, I think, Chair,
take that offline.
I think, Chair, we're always learning. Every time we have an incident, we learn from it, and we need to learn from it and adapt and change our plans and policies on the basis of what we've learned. And it's quite clear that we did learn some lessons out of Thursley and the fire. And the key lessons there were about communication and engagement with different groups. As Councillor Earls says, it was engagement and an understanding in advance with people like the town and parish councils about what their role in an emergency is and how we move that forward. Now, I know there was a briefing to members of town and parish councils, I think, and other people a while ago, but Councillor Earls did raise some issues after that, which we still need to address. And they are on the list to be considered, and we will bring forward a further revision of the emergency plan in due course. But like everything else, it's not top of the list at the moment, I'm afraid.
I'll take you one more time, Councillor Else, and I'll take Councillor Edmonds. Yes, Councillor Else, one more time.
Thank you so much, Chairman. Can I just say that even though we're living with COVID now, we could still have any number of emergencies. We could have another fire. I know it's unlikely with all the rain we've got, but we could. We could have an aircraft crash. Not many aircraft, I know, but we could. We could have any number of things happening. And I think that it should be top of the list. I think our emergency plan should be top of the list, and that's my twopence worth. Irrespective of COVID or anything else that we're having to deal with, our emergency plan should be sound, and it should be absolute, and it should be there. And I don't think it's something that should be sidelined because of something else that's happening.
No,
sorry, that's my view. Thank you,
it's good point, well made. Shall we go to Councillor Edmonds, who's been indicating?
Thank you very much. I've got two questions for Richard. First is, who's benefited from the lower levels of waste in terms of financial terms? And the second is, do we have any information or knowledge of vandalisms to on-street electric vehicle charging? I mean, the only I've ever seen is in St. James's Square, and certainly it looks very vulnerable to vandalism, but in St. James's Square, I doubt if they would get any. Thanks.
Another couple of interesting questions, Richard.
In terms of tonnages of waste, obviously domestic tonnages of waste have gone up considerably, as I said previously, and that's impacting on our collections and on the county council's onward transmission of waste and processing of waste. So there is an increased cost, certainly to the county council, for dealing with more domestic waste. What we can't get to grips with, because we don't have any control over commercial waste, is how much commercial tonnages have gone down. They undoubtedly have, and I know that some commercial waste contractors have furloughed staff because they haven't got enough work, because when businesses close, they cancel their commercial waste collections. But we can't get the data on the volume or the reduction in the volume of commercial waste. We know it's there, and we can probably estimate that it mirrors the increase in domestic waste. But there are no provisions or any laws that say we can recover the costs from commercial waste contractors. So it is an impact the local authorities, both us and the county council, will have to bear in terms of the sort of impact of COVID.
It was ever thus. What about the EV charges and vandalism?
In terms of EV chargers, I'm not aware of any history of vandalism of EV chargers in Waverley. We have only a few at the moment. There will be a lot more when the Brightwells Yard car park opens, and certainly the on-street charging that we're working with the county council on will, as you rightly say, be a potential target for vandalism. But there isn't any data at the moment on the rates of vandalism of EV chargers compared with pay and display ticket machines, for example. Probably pay and display ticket machines are more vulnerable to as a target for vandalism because they've got money in them. An EV charging point doesn't have any benefit to the vandal in terms of getting the money out of it. We have had a couple of our pay and display machines dragged away recently, but fortunately, because more people are paying through Ringo and pay by phone, there was only about £24 in it, so he didn't make a fortune out of dragging off our machine. So things like that are always vulnerable on the street, but certainly if there's an attraction such as cash in them, they're more attractive than things like EV chargers.
Thank you very much.
Right, thanks. Councillor Gale?
Yeah, just a question for Richard. You were talking about the loss of continuity with the staff when the contractors changed hands to Biffa. Do we know if all of the ex-staff were offered employment with Biffa, or did they just start completely anew, Richard?
No, all of the existing staff transferred across to Biffa. But when a new contract starts like this, all the staff transfer under the TUPE regulation. But there's inevitably a churn of staff. Some staff don't like the new management style of the new company, and other staff may decide that they've had enough. And we've had 1 or 2 retirements, I know, from the old Veolia crews. And obviously they've changed the rounds. So even though they're the same crew, they're not doing the same parts of the borough. So they're not familiar with the houses, they're not familiar with, you know, alleyways and paths and that sort of thing. So it always creates a bit of upheaval. It is settling down again. And we had a peak where bins were being missed, and it's all dropping off again. And you'll see from the data later that the missed bin rates are falling. And as Councillor Coburn knows, there are inevitably some problems in some areas where the new contractor has taken a different perspective on the collection arrangements to the old contractor. As I say, a lot of that goes back to the unofficial arrangements between residents and their friendly regular crews that we had in the past, which built up over 14 years.
Councillor Gale, you must come back.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, I think Richard's crew in the officers have dealt so swiftly with any of the things that have come up. It's really been really nice to see that we have helped our residents as much as we possibly can with the waste. And it's been really good to be able to do that, Richard. Thank you.
Oh, that's good. Now, I only have one more speaker indicating, and he's not a member of this committee, but he's put his name down to speak on this one item. So you burn your bridges if you speak now, Councillor Hyman, or you can reserve your right to speak later. So it's entirely up to you. But you've put your name down. You've got 4 minutes on this one item. You're muted.
You're muted.
You're still muted. Still muted.
So,
Right.
Sorry, it moved the button down to the middle
No,
of my
don't worry.
screen magically. Are you saying that if I speak on the, because I'd like to just raise a matter of air quality, particularly with Richard, then I can't speak to a planning issue that I'd wish to speak to?
Yeah. You can only
Okay.
speak once on this item. So if you'd rather hold your tongue and speak up, you know, after Zach, you're very welcome. It's entirely up to you.
Well, there's also the next item where the same issues are covered, aren't there? So I'll leave it until after Zach has spoken, I think, and cover other things on the next item I've indicated.
Fine. Yeah, I know
you.
you've got your name down for
Okay.
that one as well. That's fine. Right. So Zach. Oh, thank you, Richard. Sorry, that's very rude of me. Thank you, Richard. You've moved a bit. Most helpful and interesting. I think we've all, you know, got a much better idea of what's been going on. It's very difficult just living in your little bubble and then turning up for your on Zoom. So it's good to get a full picture. So Zach, the floor is yours now, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going slightly different angle to Richard. Richard's done a sort of an assessment of the year. Suffice to say, that, you know, over the year of COVID, we almost immediately were told by central government that planning must go on for the good of the economy. And to be honest, other than sort of a few issues early doors around enforcement site visits and visiting in properties, my team have sought to keep the fires burning, as it were, sometimes more successfully than others, and there have been pressures of working from home. But overall, you know, later on you'll see from the performance report, it's been reasonable. But what I was going to sort of just talk about, just very briefly, were a few sort of topics that we touched upon in the chairman's briefing. So very quickly on just an update on Dunsfold, as the chairman has requested. A quick what happens next and so what with local plan part 2, and just touch on some of the neighbourhood planning work. I just wanted to, you know, very quickly sort of outline the development management improvement plan that we're working, you know, on pushing through. I wasn't going to go into detail because there's about 24 actions in that, but just to tell you what the sort of next immediate steps are. Quick update on SIL, only insofar as the date is coming up for submissions. And then climate change, SPD, that we're starting to sort of scope out and work on, because I thought that might be of interest to the environment group, ONS. In terms of the economic development COVID resilience stroke recovery action plan, that's actually going to the wellbeing ONS on Wednesday. So I wasn't intending to go through that, but I wanted you to at least be aware of it and that it is being overseen, as it were. That was recently sort of agreed by executive, and we're pushing forward with those. And very briefly, we did get some money from central government, additional restrictions grant monies, some of which will go to direct business support, about 80%. But that has given us about £500,000. So it was 2.5 million that we got from the original grant, which is great, to spend on business support and business resilience. So we're divvying up by 80% is going to direct to businesses in the form of grants for those businesses that weren't successful in getting grants elsewhere through other means. And then 20%, so £500,000, will be put towards, you know, really looking at strategic economic planning for the future. And I only wanted to mention that now, just so you're aware that that is going ahead. So in terms of Dunsfold, when I joined just over a year ago, December 2019, I was told, well, you're going to be busy for the next year with Dunsfold, and I have been busy for one reason or another, as I'm sure many of you know, but Dunsfold hasn't actually really taken off quite as quickly as we had hoped, and things are looking up in that regard. It's crucial to our housing strategy and to the delivery of our local plan part 1, and we have been working very closely with Dunsfold Aerodrome Limited and their partners to take this forward in a managed way. There was a bit of hiatus because I think we talked about governance quite some time ago, and I know there was a bit of a hiatus, but towards the summer we managed to get that back on track, and we now, fortunately, we do have a new governance structure for taking forward not decision making, but leading the sort of this strategy for Dunsfold. So we have two boards stroke groups that have been set up. The first is a strategic Dunsfold Park Garden Village governance board. That's very much a member-led board, with the portfolio holder for Dunsfold Park and strategic portfolio holders on that, and then directors and heads of service as necessary, Surrey County Council and the Dunsfold Aerodrome Limited. And then actually sort of a lot of the background work will be done with the Dunsfold Park Garden Village Advisory Group, and that involves the parish councils, Alfold, Cranley Rural, Ellens Green, Cranley East, Chiddingfold, Dunsfold, Bramley, Busbridge and Pascombe, and then the local councillors, the local ward councillors as well. But also I chair that myself, but Councillor Liz Townsend's on that, planning officers, and again Surrey County Council and Dunsfold Aerodrome Limited. That we've had one meeting of the advisory group. The second meeting is this week. We've also got separate meetings set up with Homes England, who, as you may know, they've already given us funding of £150,000 towards taking this forward. We also have a planning performance agreement with Dunsfold Aerodrome Limited, where they pay effectively for the officer time, the additional officer time that goes into this. But we got 150 from Homes England, and we've got regular meetings with them. And without counting my chickens, we've put in a further bid for another 175,000, which would pay for a design specialist. It would help fund the design review panel, and perhaps most interestingly, we're looking to get on the coattails, if you are on active travel with County Council, and looking at opportunities for improving active travel routes in the sort of Dunsfold, Cranley, Downs Link area. And so hopefully, we can't guarantee it, but the noises that came from Homes England were quite encouraging in this. And we've very much got on board with the Garden Villages principles. We've been engaging with other garden villages through various sort of group meetings. We've engaged, as I say, with Homes England, but also you may be aware, many of you may have come to some of our training events that Design South East have put together. Basically, they put together a number of sort of masterclass stroke sort of work. They weren't workshops as such, but they were sort of seminars or webinars on various aspects of good master planning, good design. And that's been really useful, and that's given us access to other similar developments. I mean, each development will be slightly unique, but you know, we can learn a lot in terms of future maintenance, future environmental standards, design quality, all of those things. So yeah, just in terms of the sort of timescales, it has been delayed by, I mean, around a year is what they're saying, possibly 15 months, but they're still confident, and we're still confident that the number of houses set out in Local Plan Part 1 for delivery within the plan period is achievable, but there is a lot of work to be gone. We've had the first reserve matters application came in. If I'm honest, that was a reserve matters application just to keep the outline permission live in effect, and it was for a small roundabout at the end of the A281 access. That's come in and is under consideration. We have had submissions, or we're expecting very shortly the submissions on the phasing and master plan conditions. Basically, you may recall that on the outline planning permission, there's a condition requiring the submission of a detailed master plan. Now, that's not a sort of a throwaway discharge condition application. That's quite substantial, and a lot of the work over the last year that Dunsfold Aerodrome and their partners been doing is being put into developing this master plan document and an associated design principles document. They're stopping short of specific design codes because they want to leave it to the market to have some say in that, but certainly they'll have overall design principles that they expect any developers that partner with them to follow. They're not, what they're intending to do is to parcel up the land and deliver the infrastructure for each parcel, and then partner up either through competitions or through bids or interest with developers. But they, as I say, the key principles will have been set out in the master plan and design principles. So what we won't get is just, I don't know, I won't name a housing company because it's not fair, but you know, a company known for making boxes that just that people live in, just coming along and dumping those. They'll have to follow the design principles and the master plan. So in terms of further applications, the pre-commencement conditions we're expecting before the end of this financial year, so in Q1 of this calendar year, and then we're expecting reserve matters applications for the infrastructure for the servicing of those parcels in the first sort of 6 months. And then we're expecting the first sort of detailed reserve matters application with the housing, so the design of housing. It says here Q2, 3, 2021. I'm rather cautious, so I would say Q3, Q4 2021 is more realistic with all the other work that's gone on. But then the intention is to crack on with getting the development on site and up and running. They're doing all of the background work. What else have I got? Just to say that obviously we're in a PPA with Dunsfold, which we've just extended, and officers have been funded through that to work on this. But it's been quite useful actually, because of the delays. We've been able to use the sort of principal officers for other developments. But obviously now is the time to really push forward with this development. And obviously the advisory group and the governance board will hold them to account. I think that's all I was going to say on Dunsfold.
I was saying, do you want to just get your breath a bit and see if anybody does want to
Yeah, I'm
ask
happy
any
to do it
question?
on each section. Yeah.
I mean, you haven't known me long, but you do know I've got the patience of a gnat. And I do like, everything done yesterday. And, this has been going on for so long. I remember the scenarios that went out when each, depending on the number that Dunsfold Park took, the main settlements got fewer houses. And I can remember all of this. I can remember the court case. I can remember the impact that had on Farnham. And Jim McAllister saying he thought he was the most hated man in Farnham at that time because he wouldn't take any extra houses on there. But it's all part of our housing delivery. And we need the houses on Dunsfold Park, not just because Dunsfold Park needs the housing, but also because, the rest of the borough is almost dependent on the housing delivery at Dunsfold. So I don't know if anyone's got any questions on this. That was my little rant for the day, but as quickly as possible is, I think, what I'm trying to say. Shall we let Zach carry on then to local plan part 2? Is anybody indicating? Okay, local plan part 2 then, Zach.
Thank you. And sorry, the only other thing I'd say on Dunsfold is we will be doing a proper full member briefing on the master plan at some stage in the next couple of months. That's what we intend to do. Obviously, I need to talk to Democratic Services about arranging that, but yeah, we intend to do that. So we appreciate that, your point about the need to keep everyone informed. We are doing that locally through the advisory group, but I think all members have an interest in making sure that this goes forward. So thank you for that. So the local plan part 2, obviously, I'm sure as you're all aware, we're currently in the Regulation 19 consultation period. The statutory period for consultation was 6 weeks, but given the COVID situation and Christmas, New Year sort of festivities or lack of this year, but that period, we extended that period to nine weeks for the consultation, and that ends actually on the 29th. So not long, Friday week, basically. We've had very few responses at the moment, but that's to be expected. We tend to
They're
get
on their way.
in a rush in the last week, so I think there will be a lot more interest than has been shown so far. You'll recall that in terms of local plan part 2, it's not creating a brand new local plan, it's following on from local plan part 1, and I won't bore you with that, but obviously the part 2 in terms of the allocations were very focused. So they were focused on Milford, Whitley, Whitley, Milford, Hazelmere, Hindhead, and Gypsy and Traveller provision, and that was through extensions to existing sites. So that ends on January the 29th. Then we've got a sort of frantic period, and we're looking to resource up temporarily, where, dependent on the number of representations we receive, where we have to go through each and every representation and log them and record those. But the intention is still, with a fair wind, to submit our final document, provided that that it goes through the sort of governance process and members are still happy to support the submission documents. So what will happen is there may be some minor modifications that are made to the allocations and to the policies in light of the consultation responses we receive. If there are, and if they're minor, then we would still proceed to submit. We'd get approval from the executive full council and would take it through ONS, and then we'd submit in April this year, May, to Secretary of State. Obviously, they would need to set up an examination in public, and that would be done over a series of sort of maybe a couple of weeks, I would guess, with a plan of this size, with the intention that we would get their final recommendations and make any final minor modifications. I mean, subject to the inspector finding the plan sound, etc. With an adoption date that we've put out in our local development scheme. This was the last update, was November 2020, with an adoption date of February 22. The one sort of caveat I put on that is if following the consultation responses, there is a clear desire to take a different strategy in terms of any of the allocations. So you'll remember that the key allocations are all set out in there for Whitley, Milford, and for for Hazelmere and Hindhead. If the council were to decide actually there's a better strategy in terms of one site over another, one site that hasn't been identified, then we may need to do a further Regulation 19 consultation, which would have an impact. And that I think that needs to be recognised. So that would be we would do it as a 6-week consultation in accordance with the requirements. That's the statutory requirements, unfortunately. But obviously that would delay us by. I think it wouldn't just be 6 weeks. Obviously, we'd have to do the prep work for that. So you're probably looking at adoption then in sort of May 22 or June 22, subject to that. But I can't sort of second guess what's going to come forward from this. I know I'm only saying this because I know there is a lot of sort of debate, particularly locally in Hazelmere, I would say more so than in Milford and Whitley, around whether the strategy is the right one in terms of one or two of the sites that we're putting forward. And I suppose we'll need to examine that, look at the evidence that's put forward, and make a decision. But that's the sort of kind of that's the kind of process that goes on from here. Obviously, we would update ONS, the Environment Group of ONS, as we go through the process, and in advance of any sort of examination in public. And yeah, I think that's probably all I'd say on Local Plan Part 2 at this stage. But I know you may have some questions. Well,
again, do you want to just go through quickly your improvement plan, SIL and climate change?
Yeah, I'll do that. So I was only mentioning this is only so you know what else is going on. We do have emerging neighbourhood plans. Obviously, last year we made the Farnham neighbourhood plan, which is great. We've got emerging ones. So we've got Hazelmere, we've got Chiddingfold, we've got Cranley. Cranley are. Sorry, my daughter's just coming. Cranley are looking at their neighbourhood plan numbers again, because one of the sites they were relying on, they can no longer believe they can rely on, so they're looking for alternatives. But there's a lot of work going on. Eloise, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to go, darling. No, can you get Eloise? Sorry, apologies, councillors.
Sorry.
Do you want to go on? You can say hello. There you go.
Hi, George. You can answer the questions for Daddy. Okay, so
I'm so sorry about that.
No, it's not a problem. Right, so
it comes it whenever I have a meeting with portfolio holders, she always comes and says,
you can put it in the improvement plan. Lock children away.
Yeah, well,
and dogs.
From your you chose to work with them, Carol.
No, I know, but they were bigger.
so really, just to say that we are working hard with the they're all at different stages. We're working to appoint inspectors or people to assess the neighbourhood plans, but I think there's been a huge amount of work going on, and all credit to the local communities for really pushing forward that. I mean, others are not quite at that stage, but like Dunsfold are working on theirs as well. So we're well aware of what's going on, and officers are trying to support that. While also it will be the only other thing I'd say on LPP2 is, at the moment we're in a bit of calm before the storm type thing while the consultation is ongoing. It's been quite quiet, but as soon as obviously it ends and we get the flurry of representations, we will need to move fast, and we do as officers certainly understand the importance, as I've said at previous ONS meetings, of getting the local plan in. It's vital for our 5-year supply. I mean, the neighbourhood plans themselves are really helpful in terms of the 3-year test if you get a recently made neighbourhood plan, and that was proven with a case in Farnham last year with a recovered appeal by Secretary of State, and certainly we're going to use that to fight the lower weapon lane.
And the second one at the land at Green Lane Farm, that was a good result for a neighbourhood plan.
Absolutely. So that's that. I don't know how much members know about the Development Management Improvement Plan that we're pushing forward, but really, without going into the full detail of all the actions, we are conscious that there are issues. There have been ongoing issues, both in terms of performance, but really in terms of our ability to respond to communications, our ability to lead from the front rather than being on the back foot in terms of report writing, our presentations committee, our structures, etc. And one of the things that I was brought in to do was look at that. And Graham charged me with, first 6 months to just see what's going on, get the lie of the land. And then in the last couple of months, we've been working up a sort of an action plan with sort of various proposed improvements, and these are based on 6 themes, so I won't go through all the actions, but they're systems and processes. And as you may know, we're seeking to roll out in March or February-March the Horizon database end-to-end system, because at the moment they're using very clunky old systems that don't talk to each other. We're triple handling things, and that's delaying registration, validation. It's causing frustration. So we're looking at systems and processes. We're looking at staff and structure. And in the next 2 weeks, I'm going to job evaluation panel on 2 new jobs. One is a business manager and performance post, and one is a systems manager post. So the business manager will be my sort of right-hand person in a way, really looking at performance, really ensuring that we're up to date with government guidance as it comes out, making sure that we're on top of our budgets, we're on top of our audit actions, our performance reporting. So that's going to job evaluation panel next week, as is the systems manager, and that's effectively, without boring you, we've been without a sort of specific sort of administrative technical manager leading that. It's been led by the officers, and I want basically officers to focus on the professional planning side of thing, and then others focusing on the other side, so that we're using people more efficiently. So those jobs will be going out externally in beginning of February. So that's positive. And then following that, we're looking at the restructuring within the team. I can't go into full details at this stage, but yeah, we're looking at restructuring within the team. In effect, although I'm talking about two new jobs, and you might be going, oh my word, we can't afford that financially, etc. I should make it clear those are being funded through vacancy savings that I've been very prudent, or some people might say mean, over the last year, in terms of where I've had vacancies, rather than jumping to automatically fill them. I've been banking the savings where I could cover those posts, so that we're in a better position to look at a more effective structure. So yes, so we've got staff and structure, communication and engagement, and I think that's the one that comes up time and time again from members.
Of course, it's the most frustration.
Absolutely, and we recognise that, and there's various ways we can address that. Customer focus, I suppose you could put in the same thing, but linking better in with the customer service centre, helping people to help themselves, more information at people's fingertips, rather than having to try and phone someone and not getting through and then getting frustrated. Performance, absolutely key. And then in terms of decision making, so looking at our internal, so at the moment we have myself, and then we've got the development manager and the team leaders, and that's where everything ends. But sometimes there's log jams with decision making on the very straightforward Mrs. Miggins' porch type thing, which actually a principal officer could easily look at with their experience. And so we're looking at that. Obviously, all of these will be rolled through exec, and we're looking to set up staff task and finish groups, but obviously we'll be engaging with members beyond the executive as well. So but it's what I'm really saying is, we didn't think that just tinkering around the edges was enough. We really want to address this. It is a bit of a oil tanker. There's a lot to address, including culture and the way we work. I may have a very different approach to how senior managers have managed the department in the past. So so we're trying to do it in a holistic way. And grateful for your patience in the meantime. But I know, for instance, that not only the executive, but the opposition groups have been, or the leaders have been updated on this as we've gone along as well.
Good. Could you do SIL and climate change SPD in about 5 seconds?
I can do it in about 5 seconds. Yes, SIL. Just a reminder that the SIL bids close in the end of January. and then we go on to the SEAL Advisory Board, who will go through their matrix. They've got a matrix of how each one is scored, and they'll do that very, very fairly and very diligently, no doubt. And then just to say, just out of interest, we've started work in terms of scoping work for a climate change SPD. Now, I've been very clear, and the executive's been very understanding, that what I can't do is delay local plan part 2 delivery for this. But we are looking at other ways of developing the SPD, potentially through some consultancy support and with some funding that we've got, but potentially through working with our neighbours at Guildford, have just adopted a very good sustainability climate change SPD, and so working with them. And I think that's all I was going to say, to be honest.
Gosh, thank you. That's really
Sorry.
kind. No, you've done amazingly well. You cope with a child. So questions on any of that, if you can remember. I've been making notes. Councillor Else, I've got you indicating.
Thank you, Chairman. I've actually would like to go to the performance indicators, where my main concerns are tonight. And I've got 4 questions. Will you allow me to ask 4 questions?
Can I just say, we're going to look at the performance report for Q2 after this.
All right, sorry, I didn't want to lose the opportunity. And
no, I mean, don't want you to have to do it twice. Sorry. That's all I'm saying. Yeah. Would it fit in better with the performance? Yeah, the more general questions now. Yeah,
Chairman, I'll stay around for obviously for the performance report as well.
Yeah, I was going to say that's probably better there. Yeah. Councillor Gale, you've indicated.
Yeah, it's a query really on neighbourhood plans. Whitley and Milford neighbourhood plan is obviously waiting to go to referendum at the moment, which will be in May, as long as the referendum can actually happen in May. And I know at the moment it is being recognised in planning conditions, but how long will that go on for if it doesn't go to referendum, Zach? I mean, are we looking at that being a bit wishy-washy? And how does it work?
Oh, are you talking about the weight that we can attach in terms of, so I mean, it's like the local plan really. As the more developed a plan, the more weight you can give it, and obviously full weight can only be attached as part of the development plan once it's been made, a la the Farnham plan, which was sort of March, April last year. But I mean, I'm hopeful that with the, I don't want to go too much into COVID, but I'm hopeful with the, the vaccine rollout and the acceleration of that, that hopefully May might be realistic. And obviously we want to gear up for that. At the moment, it's illegal to hold a referendum, as you know, and until May, until the legislation changes. I'd rather hope that that's, that we can push forward them, because it's incredibly important, not only for you, but also, selfishly for our housing delivery and our defending, appeals. So, it is a frustration. I totally get that. And I know that other parish councils and town councils have raised the same concerns, but some things are out of our control. But certainly, where we can, where plans have gone through consultation or reached an advanced stage, they can be given some weight, but not the full weight as development plan document. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Hyman.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I just wanted to raise a couple of issues under this, which are the it goes to the issue of Dunsfold delivering LPP2, which is the white paper and the new housing numbers that come out, and also air quality, which used to be on the NVOS agenda. If other members want to speak to those before I do, because I won't speak to them if somebody else covers the issues, I'm happy not to speak as long as
I haven't got anybody else. I mean, you could finish, unless anybody else does wish to raise anything. We're doing the corporate performance next, so obviously people got a chance there to raise issues. So no, you can finish this off if you like.
Okay, in that case I'll cover them now if you don't mind. Well, the first one is obviously the issue of the white paper, the MHCLG announcement on December the 12th from Robert Jenrick about the housing numbers, which took our numbers up to 689 from 590 a year. And I'm assuming, and I'd like Zach to correct me if I'm wrong, please, that means we've got 1,971 more homes to accommodate within our plans, neighbourhood plans and LPP 1 and 2. And I think that's from later this year. for a couple of years till they up them again in a couple of years' time. Obviously, this affects LPP2 and any review of LPP1, and we have to do a review by 2023, within 5 years of its first adoption. Through the white paper, there are three sorts of areas: growth and renewal and protection. We would at Waverley qualify and do qualify as a protection area, so we don't have to take these numbers, provided that we assert our position in respect of the SPAs, which give us the protection. My questions really, I suppose, are does this committee intend to press for due protection? That's a question to you yourself, I suppose, but to Zach, really. How do these new numbers sit with the neighbourhood plans that are going through? How do they affect, or the current plans going through the neighbourhood plans, LPP2 and possible review of LPP1? Because obviously there's no point in getting an inspector in later this year or next Christmas time or whatever it is for LPP2 if the government's turned around and said, hey, you've got to take a load more anyway, which is what it's doing.
Second question, we know we've got problems. Second question.
Second issue is in respect of air quality, and it's an issue I think that you care about a lot as well. But we've got the Farnham Infrastructure Project, local liaison forums, that sort of thing going through. Air quality seems to have taken a bit of a second place to other issues here, and we've got an air quality action plan. In fact, we haven't at the moment because the issues that the thing we were going to.
Sorry to interrupt you again, Councillor Hammer, but you're supposed to be asking a question on what Zach has just talked to us about. And I don't remember him talking about air quality.
Well, it goes to both, because it goes to the local plans that are going through and the rejigging and the infrastructure. And although as Zach didn't specifically mention Farnham's infrastructure, no. I wanted really to know what's whether the Farnham the existing infrastructure plans which are in LPP1 are being dropped in favour of plans, and what this committee is going to be doing in future in respect of air quality, because it seems to have gone off the radar. We're not being consulted as a committee.
No, I mean, I take your point on that, and one of the reasons is we've got so many committees that we sort of, if you like, parked it. But I don't really think. I think that's something we as a committee have to discuss. I put it into Mark's basket, because we used to look at it, and now they've set up two other committees on air quality. So how we tie it all together might be something for you.
But it is Waverley's responsibility to have an air quality action plan, and that's been taken away from us, it seems.
Yeah, but that's actually not. Yeah.
Sorry.
But can you ask a question to Zach on based on what he's spoken to us about?
Well, okay. Well, specifically something he's just come up with. Then you've clocked my air quality issue, and I'm sure you'll take it up yourself. Perhaps can we have the development management improvement plan in front of MVOS, please, on the forward programme on the next agenda or something, because I think that's important for us to look at, isn't it?
Well, we were supposed to be having it, this one, if I remember rightly, and it was postponed. So again, Mark, can you pick that one up? Work with Zach. So what was the first question you asked, Zach?
Well, it's particularly about the white paper and the housing numbers. Am I right? It's 1,971 that we'd be getting to fit into, to the coming years extra. And how does this affect and sit with the neighbourhood plans and LPP2 and review of LPP1 that's coming forward?
Do you think anyone knows? Over to you, Zach.
No. I mean, I think it's a valid question. I mean, obviously, you would have been aware that under the earlier consultation, the one that ended on the 1st of October, the number was actually significantly higher. The set number for that. And so actually, this kind of goes back to the original from a few years ago. My understanding from the guidance is that obviously for those authorities that are already at Regulation 2, which we are, that we'd have a transition period of 6 months, and the government doesn't want to hold up those authorities that are already well advanced with their plans. So we'd have 6 months to submit to the planning inspectorate for examination. But I think Councillor Hyman makes a very valid point. I mean, we know that there will be more pressure for more housing under any review of the local plan. I think we all accept that. This is a this is a sister document, as you like, to the LPP1, and obviously, so the numbers we're working on in LPP2 are consistent with those set out in as being required in LPP1. So my understanding is that there is a transition phase. So it is important that we do get the submission to Secretary of State for examination. But I think we could be in an unenviable position whereby almost immediately after adoption of LPP2, we'll be starting to look at because we'll be into 2022. And as you quite rightly say, we have to decide. We don't necessarily have to review. I think Woking looked within their 5 years and said, "Oh, we don't want to review," and decided not to. But I don't think that will wash if the numbers nationally set are if a lot of the white paper does come through. So I think we'll be in a position where we almost certainly have to start looking at a new local plan per se. But that shouldn't, to my mind, preclude us from carrying forward with LPP2, because it provides us the protection in the meantime, whilst in terms of sort of those areas that aren't in the green belts, from unwanted housing. Sorry, Chairman.
I was just going to say, planning documents are a bit like washing machines. I mean, they're out of date the instant you get them. You know what I mean? There's always another one that's better coming up, and there's always something to change. I'm going to take Richard now, he's indicated, and then I'd like to move on to the performance, if I may. So, Richard, would you like to round this off?
Right, I'm doing my best to unmute, Chair. Thank you. Just quickly, in response to Councillor Hyman, we have continued to monitor air quality. There was a gap of in the middle of the pandemic where our contractor didn't change the tubes for 2 or 3 months, so there will be a gap. We will be starting work on the annual air quality statement for 2020 shortly, once we get the December results. We've also got some other reports from Ricardo AEA, who are our consultants on trends in pollution during COVID, which I'm sure members of the committee might find interesting at some point. And we do have an air quality action plan, but it is out of date. It needs revising. And that was submitted last year with the annual air quality status report. But I'm more than happy to add an item to your agenda for the coming meetings to talk more about air quality. Because even though we've got an air quality steering group and a Farnham air quality working group, that doesn't preclude the scrutiny committee from scrutinising the work that's being done on air quality. So I'm more than happy.
That would be good. Are you listening, Mark? Just as long as your arm. Welcome to Waverley. Right, I'd like to move on if I may. Obviously, thank you, Zach, and thank you, Richard, for both those presentations, and do pass on questions. But we do have item 8, which is the usual corporate performance report, that I wanted the others to be slightly different from just looking at the performance. So as we have the time. So now we're looking at the performance. I suppose logically we should go for Richard, but the planning one does come before the other one. So should we take the planning report first, if Zach's got a voice still? Again, it's really by default looking at the ones that are going wrong. Right, Councillor Else, it's your big moment. You're muted still.
Am I?
You're not now.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you. So, Zach, do you have a pencil? Because I've got 4 questions, if I may, Chairman. The first one, P1153. You have exceeded the target 80%. You've exceeded it and achieved 91.98%. But I would like to know, it specifically indicates that's an 8-week achievement. I would like to know how many of those are with an agreed extension of time, because I don't think that if you have achieved 91.98% doesn't quite tie in with my next question, which is the level of complaints that you have received. and the majority, you say, are related to applications and pre-apps. Now, we can't see which are pre-apps, which is a very bad percentage you've achieved, 56%, I think. We can't see which is which. Now, I'm wanting really to drill down into what you're actually achieving, because these performance indicators aren't actually telling me what I want to know. So that's the first, well, that's the first and the second question. So how do the level of complaints reflect correctly when we are showing targets that are being exceeded, but we are having lots of complaints and we can't see what the complaints refer to? They're lumped together. The other thing is the sort of another question is the pre-apps. Very, very bad result on the pre-apps. What is being done to address this? I would like to know, please. And my fourth question is discharges of conditions. What is the time target? Do we have a time target for that? And if so, are they being met? I don't know. I might have missed it, Zach, if I have, forgive me, but I can't see that, that's indicated anywhere. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Els. Zach, can you answer those questions?
Yeah, I mean, yes. I mean, the target, the P, let me just get it up, sorry. The P153 is, sorry, these P5, 151, 153, 123, where it says determined within 13 weeks or 8 weeks. That's in terms of the national guidance, which is either within 8 weeks or within an agreed extension of time. So it's that percentage where we've either dealt with him within 13 weeks or have got an extension of time. I'd be frank that a large proportion, I'm afraid I don't have the specific stats because I wasn't asked the question in advance, but so I don't have the specific stats to hand. But yeah, a large proportion of those will be extensions of times. And yes, I think sometimes, if being frank, sometimes people will grant an extension of time because they feel that they possibly have no choice but to grant an extension of time. And so we do get complaints about delays on planning applications, but the stats are right in that that's what the government judges us on. The government has standard returns that we have to do quarterly, and their judgment is based on not just whether you've dealt with them within 8 weeks, but whether you've dealt with them within 8 weeks or as agreed with the applicant. So, but I don't have the exact stats, and I'd be very happy to come back, at the next, for the next quarterly performance report to actually find out the exact stats. But this is one area that I want to get away from, and that's one of the reasons behind the planning improvement plan, is it's not tenable. I think in terms of sort of the major applications, the big applications, your Cogsbridge Farms, those sorts of Dunsfolds, extending a time limit with a developer to get a decent scheme and one that works for them, to me, is a reasonable approach, and arguably on sort of mid-range applications. But for householder applications, I don't want to shoot myself in the foot here, but for householder applications, I haven't worked previously in an authority that actually sought extensions of time on householder applications. We didn't at Guildford. We just dealt with applications. They were either within 8 weeks or they weren't within 8 weeks, and Guildford still managed to get 90% within 8 weeks. So it's not beyond, it's not beyond our powers to do that, but it does need a lot of improvements to processes, to communication, to our performance, and it needs to be properly managed, and that's what the performance improvement plan is all about. Sorry,
pre-app, I remember. What was the other one, Councillor Els? You mentioned
the other one was
pre-application,
discharge of condition.
Oh, the conditions, yeah.
So in terms of pre-apps, our performance is actually not as good as you actually said, Councillor Els. It was 29% within the 28-day target. Now, that's very poor. It's better than last quarter, which was even more embarrassing. But the problem we have with our pre-app service, if I'm frank, is it was set up a few years ago. It's not fit for purpose. I don't think it was ever been fit for purpose, because we're lumping all pre-apps in together and saying 28 days. and we're judging ourselves on that. Whereas, you know, you can imagine someone who wants to build a conservatory might want to put in a pre-app and would expect a response within 3 weeks rather than 4 weeks. Whereas someone putting in, as again, you know, a scheme for 500 houses, 300 houses, you know, 28 days is not going to be sufficient for us to consult with, you know, external bodies, etc., and get a response. So the answer for that is, I'm not going to stand here, you know, sit here and defend that performance. It's bad. It's really bad, and we're aware of it. What we've done is we've asked my colleague Kelvin Mills, who you know, who's the head of commercial services. He's doing a root and branch review with a group of planning officers from the DM team, basically to look at that pre-app service, make it A, fit for purpose, and B, actually, my assumption is that some councils actually do quite well in terms of financing services through pre-app, but you don't get pre-apps coming through the door if performance isn't right. So if someone's paying for a service, they will expect a level of service, and that's where we need to get to, and that is a key tenet of the action plan. So that is being addressed. Discharge conditions, the target, I believe, for most is 8 weeks, and I don't know if we I mean, certainly we don't record it in the quarterly results. I'm sure I could get the figures again, and I'm happy to contact Councillor Else outside of the meeting with those performance. But you know, again, I would imagine it won't be 90-100% within 8 weeks. You know, and this is one of the reasons we've got the improvement plan.
Okay, very quickly, Councillor Else, because I've got Councillor Edmonds waiting. Still muted. Still muted.
I'm not now, am I?
No. Oh.
Sorry, very grateful. Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to say, Zach, I don't really need you to come back to me offline. I think this committee needs to have the explanation.
Oh, okay.
And all I'd like to say is that I feel that these performance indicators really aren't worth the paper they're written on, because they don't reflect what's actually happening, which is what we're supposed to be able to look at. So I think there's a case for a bit of a rejig on our performance indicators in planning. Thank you.
Perhaps that can come under the improvement plan.
Yeah, but I would come back to the fact that the government sets statutory timescales unless agreed in writing with the applicant. So I think these stats are perfectly valid. I don't think it gives a true picture, and I agree with Councillor Else there in terms of, you know, there are people that may be agreeing extensions of times, you know, under duress, but you know, these are the actual stats, and that's what the government judges us on. So I'd be loath to sort of, you know, I'm happy to provide the actual data of how many of those are extensions of time. That's no problem, but these are valid performance indicators because they're entirely consistent with what we have to send back nationally to the government. So I mean, that's, you know, I don't think I say much more on.
No, I was going to say, I think you're going to have to agree to disagree at the moment. Councillor Edmonds.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chair. Is this the appropriate time to ask a question on the table on page 13? Complaints queue.
I can't hear you again about the.
Okay, sorry, I'll try and speak up. Is this the appropriate time to ask for the complaints Q2 question?
Yeah.
Okay, great. One problem I do have with the is it says how much time is taken. There's reference quality of the response, or whether the complainant is satisfied with the response. Is there no way that we can get this information? I mean, to me, a performance based purely on time is unacceptable. It doesn't tell me a lot. It doesn't tell me about the performance.
Well,
I think you're going to get the same answer as Councillor Else, because these are based on what we're judged on. But Zach, what do you have an answer there?
Well, one that might sound a bit rude, but in terms of, you know, working in Waverley, I find there's very few level 1 complaints that don't go on to a level 2 because the people are unhappy, and quite often they're just unhappy that they haven't got planning permission or that their neighbour has got planning permission. So I'm not even sure that, you know, you can judge the quality. I mean, I would say the quality of our complaint responses should be judged by how many ombudsman cases there are upheld against us, and there are very few and far between. I mean, you know, I can't point to any since I've been head of planning here. So I mean that's a way of judging the quality, because I don't think you can judge it on whether someone's satisfied with their level 1 complaint response, because nearly always they come on and say I haven't got the response I wanted. I want to talk to Mr. Elwood, and then I haven't got the response I wanted. I'll go to the Ombudsman. So I mean, yeah, you're right. The answer is that these are the corporate. This is the way we monitor complaints corporately. It is based on whether we're responding to them within the corporate performance. But if members wanted to suggest a different way of recording this, I mean, Louise is here, and I'm sure
Well,
sure
Louise
she's
is indicating.
Yeah.
So can we take Louise now, and then?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I do hear the point. It's very much like when I used to work in planning itself, and we ask planning applicants, did they like the way their application was handled? And of course, if they had a refusal, they'd say no. What we want is, are they happy with the process? And it's exactly the same with complaints. What we have to measure is whether the complaint process was handled to their satisfaction, i.e. did they get a fair hearing? Was it handled efficiently? They might not like the outcome, but it's actually the process we have to measure, because that's very difficult. Same thing for applications and complaints. If they don't like the outcome, they won't like it. So.
I think many can
right, I'd like to sort of get on to Richard fairly quickly, but I've got Councillor Darcy. Do you want to come back very quickly, Councillor Edmund?
Sorry, Chair. Yes, most people can accept a decision against them, providing it's argued effectively.
I think you've made the same point that Louise just made, and I think that's something we have to be very clear on. But I'm
not sure that's my experience either. It's not sure that's my experience either, Councillor Coburn. We get a lot of complaints which are literally people just unhappy that their neighbours have been granted something, and actually when you drill down into it, what we're judged on by the Ombudsman is not the decision, whether it was the right decision. We're judged on whether we've gone through the correct process and we've done things lawfully. And as I say, we do that. I mean, planning is such an emotive subject. I'm afraid there will always be winners and losers. It's the way it is.
You're absolutely right. Councillor Darcy?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask if the new IT system would be obvious to those of us who are on the planning committee. So will it make any changes to how we see planning applications?
I think the answer there is no, not in itself, but one of the strands of the action plan is to completely review the committee reports and delegated report structure. I mean, we want to make it fit for purpose, and we want to give you reports and information that you need. So there will be engagement with you over the next few months. When I say you, I mean the wider you as councillors on committees, as to what would help. Obviously, we need to balance that with resources, but we want you to have the information there to be able to make the best decision you can. Equally, at the same time, in terms of sort of the reports, you don't necessarily see that often, the delegated reports that are signed off by, on my behalf, rather than by a committee. We've got ourselves in a situation where actually we're putting far too much work into them, and that's having a detrimental impact on other avenues and our speed and also our ability to communicate. So there's a lot of strands to this improvement plan, but one of them is very much looking at report structures, and indeed, obviously, at the moment we're in a sort of an interim position with the committees. We've got the two Eastern and Western committees, and I know that's another area that the council wants to look at corporately, and that will be a further discussion. Sorry, Carol, I appreciate you want to move on.
No, it's just it's. I've got Councillor Hyman, the only other one at the moment, indicating I'd like this to be the last question. As brief as you can make it, please, Councillor Hyman. Poor Richard's sitting somewhere, and we've got his performance to look at as well. So could we have your question, Councillor Hyman?
Okay, well, I've got to cover it, both of them, obviously, in my time here. But the first issue is curbside electricals, which is covered on pages 24 and 26. We were meant to have curbside electricals taken away when the Bring sites were closed, which I think they were closed, it says in here, in Q2. But we haven't got the curbside electricals and clothing collections being
Sorry,
being
I
sorted.
thought we were.
Sorry, we're going
I thought
on
we were
to
still on
Richard's in a
planning.
moment.
Are we still on planning?
Are we on the
We're still doing
corporate
planning.
performance?
Yeah, we're just doing the planning. Well, I'm going to move to Richard now.
Councillor Copas.
Okay. In that case, I'll go with my planning issue and can cover that later. Brightwells is on page 28, which comes under planning in a way, but this is an issue of perhaps, you might say, project monitoring and delivery, because it's past the planning stage. Unfortunately, it's not.
No, I'm going to stop you there because we're looking
I can't
at.
comment on.
No,
I can't comment on
it's
delivery
not
of
in
Brightwells.
Zach's remit. So let's move on then. Thank you very much.
Chairman, sorry,
yes.
can I just, at the risk of taking a little bit more time, can I just point out one stat that I was that I'm very pleased with, and the reason I mention it is not just to sort of so you give me a pat on the back, give us a pat on the back, but do you remember sort of a year ago in January, my first ONS was about appeals performance and trying to address that. Now, I'm not saying that it may just be a coincidence, but you'll have seen that. From P3, this is on page 36 of your agenda. We had a number of quarters where we were in the red, well over 30% of appeals being allowed. I'm just really heartened and delighted that, and I don't necessarily have the explanation, but I was very heartened that for the last 6 months, the first 2 quarters, we've performed really well on appeals, and that's really good in terms of, because the government has just announced their standards authority data for the major planning applications and other applications, and it stands us in very good stead that we've turned a corner there. But I wasn't really saying that just for a pat on the back, although wouldn't mind one.
Of course, you can have one. Everyone's been giving you the thumbs up, so it's not quite the same as a pat on the back. But
just to say that it's encouraging. But that's not. I'm not being complacent about it. We do need to keep a weather eye on it. Okay.
Yeah. There's an assortment of clapped hands and thumbs up. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, Zach.
Thank you.
Do you mind never all bad, but remember, we do home in on the bad things. That's the whole point. Of course, we accept the good things. But
do you mind if I leave, or do you need me?
Not at all.
Thank you very much.
No,
thank you, members. Thank you very much
indeed. So, Richard, let's have a look at your area. Do you wish to say anything before we launch at you? Or?
I think, Chair, I probably said enough in my earlier presentation to cover most of this, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Right, so where do we start with the environment performance indicators? Who wishes to start? Let me have a look. Haven't got anybody indicating. No questions at all for Richard? He's answered them already, has he? Nothing anyone's worried about. Where's Councillor Hyman? Oh, Councillor Else is very pleased. Nobody has any questions at all over this. We're quite content. Certainly, Richard gave us a pretty comprehensive thing. Councillor Darcy?
Yeah, sorry. Actually, oddly enough, I was going to ask a very similar question to the one that Councillor Hyman seems to want to ask, which was about the curbside collection of textiles and small electricals. It wasn't quite clear to me why that didn't go ahead when it was meant to, but when will it be going ahead, I suppose, is the question.
If I can, Chair, as soon as we can resolve the contract issues for transporting the material from Biffa to the County Council or other destinations, we will implement the service. It's one of those things that's been pushed down the list because of our work that we've been doing in response to COVID, amongst other things. The reality is that the textile banks and small wee banks are still on site at the moment, so there is still the service available to the public at the Bring sites. we took away the dry mix recycling containers because of the significant contamination rates in those. And you'll see from the performance indicators that since we've done that, the rejection rate has dropped dramatically, because that was going into the recycling and being rejected. But the textiles and weaves are on site still, and we will bring that new service on stream as quickly as we can.
I think we'll all be very grateful. We've all got little things piling up somewhere in the house waiting for it. So we'll all be very pleased when it does arrive. Councillor Hyman?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, I was really looking more along the lines of, is it economic? Can we afford to do it in the financial climate? Is it something where people do that elsewhere? That, you know, is it something that that is successful or produces money in some way, or gets us credits in some way? Because you can imagine that, you know, putting clothing outside to be collected and putting electrical items out, the amount of extra time they're taking with the COVID difficulties we've got. If we are in a situation where we never master COVID, you know, we'd have to learn to live with it to some extent, because like the common cold and flu, it sort of goes on forever. It's just colds are worse than they used to be, sort of thing, and more deadly. Then, you know, are we actually going to be doing this, and should we be looking at whether we ought to be doing it, I suppose? Because obviously small electrical products can go into people's black bins, and often do. Clothing very often does go down to charity shops or whatever, or goes into bins. Is there a good, you know, or is there another way of this being done rather than dump it onto the cost onto the taxpayer, the council taxpayer? Is that something we should be looking at, and is that something the council's looking at? And I did want to, if possible, just ask a general question on some of the text that was in the performance report. Are we allowed to do that, or are we not allowed to? Chairman.
Carol, you're muted.
I've got the dog here snoring away, and I wasn't sure how much of it you could hear, so I kept muting myself. Richard, sorry, do you wish to? I mean, should we be doing it? You know, what's the answer to Councillor Hyman?
Well, if I can, Chair, with that, it is included in the contract. So yes, we have covered the cost of doing it within the contract. Textiles do currently generate us a small income. It's dropped compared with what it was previously, but of course a lot of textiles that we will collect are ones that are not reusable textiles, and the charities only want the reusable textiles. We will collect what isn't, what the charity shops won't accept, but we do need to take it out of the residual waste stream.
I mean, I'm all for it, as you know, but you know, I can understand the question. Councillor Hyman, you say you had a follow-up?
Well, no, I wanted to ask about the, because it comes under planning and certainly comes under building control and parks and countryside and the sorts of things that are on NBOS agenda. It's on page 28, which is issues in respect of Brightwell's yard. Are we not allowed to speak to those?
No, it's not that you're not allowed to, but our remit goes up to page 27, as far as I knew. 28 goes into the next.
But if you look at the top of page 20, top of page 28, it says commercial, but it's a building control, leisure, parks and countryside, training. It covers everything, and at the bottom it talks about what is definitely a planning issue and not others, I would assume.
I don't think anybody can answer your question, Councillor Hyman. I think you know it should go to the another ONS.
Okay, well, there is something which I'm quite sure should be considered to be under the remit of this committee, which is on page 52, which is the absence data, which covers all staff, but so specifically speaking about environmental health staff. I don't know whether you've read that and people have read what it says.
No, I haven't. I only cover the the performance data that covers the two remits that we look at. So, you know, the others go to the other ONSs. So that's why I don't bother. Well, it's not that I don't bother, I do read them, but, you know, I don't form questions on them because the other ONS will do that.
Well,
So
a lot
that's
of this,
why-
of course, is cross-cutting, and this goes to the COVID issues and whatever. But if you're not willing to cover them, then that's it certainly does. The staffing we were talking about earlier and COVID issues, and that's what this is about. So I thought that it was under our remit because obviously our environmental health staff are under our remit. But
yeah, the problem is you're absolutely right. There's always an overlap. But, if we all start discussing everything, it'll be like the old committee system where we discuss the budget 3 times and then the 4th time at council. There comes a point where repetition is not really what we need. So
you're
I'm sorry,
absolutely right. I was wondering whether Richard would be able to give us an insight into his area, because obviously each of the committees are going to be talking to different heads of service who can give a view on how it's affecting their area. And yeah, I thought it would be useful, but particularly to ask Zach, but as he's the effect on the planning staff. But as he's gone, I won't get an answer to that anyway. So I can understand your point.
Sorry about that. I was just cutting off at 27.
Sorry, Chairman. I would simply then, in that case, draw the attention, draw 2 members of committees' attention to the top of page 52, where it says absence data and there's a paragraph of text, and suggest that they do have a read through it, because it affects everything, not just not just value for money or whatever else might think it was their area. And we'll leave it there because we're getting close to your time, Madam Chairman.
We are indeed, but that's
Thank
not. It's just, as I say, I'm trying to keep the remit very focused. Does anybody else have any questions or statement for Richard? Or I'm sorry, Councillor Darcy, I've just noticed your yellow hand.
It was really something that Councillor Hyman said, which I thought perhaps shouldn't go uncommented on, which was he suggested that people might want to put their electrical waste in the black bin, and I believe that electrical waste is covered by the WEEE regulations, and that you're supposed to put it into your black bin. But I thought, I'm sure Richard could explain.
Yeah, if I can, Chair, small electrical appliances shouldn't be going in the grey bin. The regulations are quite clear. The regulations are there to ensure that all small electrical appliances are ideally recycled and shouldn't be going in residual waste. I
think most of us have always taken them to the dump, and I was so looking forward to having, the curbside, because I don't know about you, but I've got about half a dozen old irons. I always thought, well, I'll just keep it in case. Goodness knows why you keep old irons or bits of all sorts of rubbish that you think. I always remember hearing somebody had a tin, and on the top it said, "Pieces of string too short to be of any use." And it's always stuck in my mind that we're all like it. You think, well, just hold on to it just in case. But what you do with an old iron, I don't know. I should be really pleased when you do this curbside, and we can actually put some of this stuff out. And as for scruffy clothes, you're absolutely right. Mine can't go to the charity shop. They completely refuse to take anything I take down. I'm afraid it has to be binned by the time I get round to throwing it out. Does anybody else wish to make a final comment, or can we thank Richard and Zach in his absence? I hope you found it interesting, given the time, just to hear a little bit more, because I know my frustration is I sometimes feel we have a lack of information. I hope, and I do thank the heads of department for spending so much time. Councillor Elsh, you wish to round us all off, do you?
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I feel rather dissatisfied with the response I got about my questions, re the performance indicators. I really do feel seriously that they need adjusting. We've always been able to adjust them in the past. Just because they're government performance indicators means absolutely nothing. And I'm not sure that particular point has been appreciated. We can ask for whatever we want, and personally I would like to be able to drill down a little bit deeper into what is actually going on in the planning department with regard to their performance, because I think unless we can do that, we're just taking for granted that this wonderful number, 90% achievement performance indicator in responding to applications in 8 weeks is simply not the case. And we need to know that, and we need to be told that, and we have a right to be told that. So that's the last point I'd like to make on that, Chairman. I leave it with you as to how insistent you feel you need to be about it. I don't see the point in being told we've got 90% in 8 weeks satisfaction on applications when that's simply not the case.
Right. Louise wants to answer, so perhaps she can tell us how we can, if we wish to change these, and also, well, where we can discuss it, if nothing else. Louise?
Thank you, Chairman. I think there are two possible approaches to this. What we agreed a few years ago was that we wouldn't make in-year changes on performance indicators, but we would review them at the end of the year. So the committee is quite right to sort of look at the performance indicators and see whether they're giving you the information that you find helpful and useful. So we can have a look at them. The other approach is to ask for a more bespoke performance report on planning statistics, which could be produced perhaps for the March cycle. So there's two ways of doing it. We could review all the PIs, which we tend to try and do at the end of the year anyway. Are they showing us what we want them to show us? Or else have a particular report on it. Either way, we can do that.
I think, you know, I'm getting the feeling that we would quite like a detailed report, but we do understand the restrictions, and we do understand that there's a performance plan, an improvement plan being developed. Now, you can't do I'm following Councillor Elsie's point here, you can't do a proper improvement plan until you've identified the problems accurately. You know, you've got to know where it's all going wrong. So I think, Louise, perhaps if you could just indicate by waving at me if you feel that a sort of detailed look at the faults, you know, the actual performance of the planning department would be quite a useful thing for this committee.
Yes, indeed.
Do I get the impression that you would quite?
We can certainly do that, because I think what Councillor Else is saying is that these are sort of quite high level figures, and they're probably some other stuff underneath, and we want to sort of have a drill down into some of these and have a look at
I mean, presumably all the data is somewhere on some system. It's just a question of getting the numbers and giving us a proper indication, and then we can see why, as Councillor Else says, you know, in theory, you've got a satisfaction rate in one set of indicators, and then when you get to the complaints, it's very obvious that, you know, the two don't work together. So I take Councillor Else's point. I don't know what the answers are, because like everybody else, I don't see the detailed data. So if we could, I know, you know, everything is difficult at the moment, and I'm not trying to make life more difficult for anybody, but if, Louise, we could leave that in your hands to see if we can drill down a little bit more, so that we have got an accurate picture of any of the issues in the planning department. And it will help anyway to inform the improvement plan, won't it? Because, as I say, you need to know the issues before you can put them right. Does anybody else want to make a final comment on that? Yes, Councillor Gale.
Yeah, I agree with Jenny, actually. If something comes up and you've got performance figures, if the bar has been set very low, you can achieve them very easily. So if what they're working to, I understand, is the sort of guidelines that are handed down from central government that they have to work to. But if we need more information, I'm sure that's attainable.
It's like the missed bin collection, isn't it? I mean, your target ought to be naught, as far as I can see, but, you know, I can understand. But, you know, I mean, who would want any missed bins? So your target should be absolutely not. Councillor Else, and we really must bring this to a close. You're still muted. You're muted.
Again. You're very indulgent. Thank you, Chairman. Some years ago, we used to have working groups who set the targets. They aren't government set targets, they are Waverley set targets. And we are quite able to set the targets ourselves and readjust them as necessary, as we think necessary. So I don't know whether this committee still has the ability to have a working group. I'm not clear on that myself, but certainly that's how we always used to do it. And we used to sit in a little room, committee room 3, and work out you know, whether a flyer tipping ought to be in a 1 day, or whether we ought to give them 1.5 days or whatever. So we could always set them. They're Waverley set targets. They're not government targets. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, I will send Louise and Mark away with that ringing in their ears and see if we can improve the performance data for us, so that we are really feeling that we are scrutinising what's going on. This is our function. So does everyone agree with that? We're all sort of, and as I say, this is in order to get anything that's not working properly. It's not about portioning blame. It's about getting something working properly. And anybody with children knows you know you have to start with the truth, because nothing else will actually improve performance in any field. So I think we can leave that with the officers. Thank you, Councillor Else, Councillor Gale and Councillor Darcy for raising this. Oh, and Councillor Hyman, I know you're not part of this committee, but thank you. I think it is something that we should be looking at, you know, because as I say, we're all aiming at the end to have as good an authority as we possibly can be part of. Does anybody else wish to make a final statement, or can I declare the meeting? We haven't got, I take it, anything else we need to do, Kim, in exempt. So
Chairman,
if everyone
sorry,
feels they've, yeah, sorry.
Sorry, Chairman, there was just one thing which I noticed from the, I think it was from the minutes or something, that talked about the green spaces review that came, that was looked at, the scoping was looked at last June, in the June meeting, and I'd gone back to that and had a look at it, and there was a question in there as to putting on the forward programme an item. It recommended that something was put onto onto your forward programme in the future, and I just wanted to mention that perhaps you would ask Mark to look at that and make sure it doesn't get missed as green spaces comes and goes. I don't know, there's a hold up on it, but there is something more for Mark to get his teeth into there, which was mentioned at the last June's meeting regarding green spaces. There is an issue where you'd said, yes, we'll put that on the forward programme in future. I can't remember the details, and I doubt if anybody else can either, but it's there. That's something else to look at.
I think it's probably green verges, and we never have cracked it. Right, thank you for that, like Councillor Hyman. One of these days we'll understand what we meant by that when we said it. But green verges keeps coming up, and that we've looked at it up over and over again to see what how it actually fits into a pattern of work, rather than just an issue that we talk about every so often. Thank you very much indeed for your contributions, your patience, and we look forward to working with Mark and to having a more interactive and also active forward work programme as we go forward, because at the moment we're in a little bit of a sort of impasse, aren't we? So fingers crossed that things free up a little bit and we actually have to do something a little more focused at the next meeting and the meetings after that. Thank you very much indeed, and enjoy the rest of the evening.